Woo! We are getting into it today. T Joy Creations is going deep. I've been having conversations recently with friends and colleagues regarding our transition from what our normal lives were back in February to what our day-to-day life is like now. We've all been adjusting to changes that the pandemic has inserted into our lives. Many are feeling deep sadness and loneliness over what is no longer available. Everyone has a very different situation to live into, so the recovery is very unique as well. Some friends and colleagues are busier than ever. Their jobs have been work from home for a long time. Others have adjusted more quickly because they've been digital or virtual companies. Other industries, however, have been kind of disoriented because their jobs are much more in-person and relational, and so put demands on them, which are several layers of precaution and cleanliness. Others work and live from home, so the bar of loneliness is even higher. To some degree, we've all lost something through the pandemic. So pushing through layers of loss can be exhausting, isolating, and depressing. That's why today's episode is about ambiguous loss. I first heard the term ambiguous loss in a conversation between Pauline Boss and Krista Tippett back in 2016. Pauline Boss was the actual one who coined the term and has written books about ambiguous loss. But in very simple terms, it's when you lose something or someone that was in your life that mattered to you, but then it was removed, and there's a sense of sadness or loss about it. But the term ambiguous comes from the aspect that there will be never a closure or resolution. It's almost as if there's this big, overwhelming mystery or a constant state of unanswered questions, like an open wound. There's a desire for a closing or resolution or security, maybe knowns, quantities, but you don't get it. It just doesn't come. So it remains vague, open, uncertain, and doubtful. The reasons for the lack of resolution varies. Like one example might be if someone is missing in action from war or a child is kidnapped. But there's other measures of loss that are quiet and tedious, like when someone goes away or has dementia and incremental losses like Alzheimer's. It can feel like the death of 1,000 cuts. Other situations that invite loss is when friends or family members leave out of your life, whether it's voluntary or not. Sometimes the relationship feels torn or broken, but is it over? You can't quite tell. If someone has experienced several types of loss, like divorce, losing a job, maybe going through friends who leave, heartbreak of a broken relationship, maybe getting older, losing your youth, these are all kinds of loss that start to accumulate. And with those accumulations, it just becomes this sense of heavy loss in your life, and it becomes like this sensation of free floating. And it doesn't necessarily come to an end because it's almost like you get a grief and another grief and another grief and another grief. Well, I've been through that, and so I understand the challenge of when you're wrapping your mind around something because you're trying to say, how do I deal with all this losingness? It's really natural and appropriate to feel sad over the losses. The level of grief can vary from person to person. So if someone loses a job and gets another one, well, the loss is short-lived. Or if you lost a friend and then gained another, sometimes that's not as big of a deal. Or if you got divorced but found someone else, well, the loss is not sustained. But what if you can't get over it because the loss stays there? Well, then you have to kind of work through that. That's where therapy and coaching can come in. How do you find your way back when you can't quite get on your feet and people are tired of listening to you being sad? Or how do you reach out to people if they're frustrated that you're not over it yet and they can't handle your sadness anymore? Should you stop being authentic? Maybe you should pull it in. Is it better to withdraw from them so that they don't feel pressured by you and makes it harder for you to be with them? Do you stop sharing the real you because they liked you as happy but they don't really like you as sad? And so then you feel like you got to disown part of yourself. Or then you think, how do I uplift myself when they can't quite see the good and you can't quite see the good and all you feel is despair? Lots of these kinds of questions come up during ambiguous loss. Well, now that we've all been added on a pile-on with the pandemic, where this new societal norm is to create social distance, like create a separation physically, step back, pull away, don't get too close, cover your face so we can't see what's really happening under there. The pandemic has raised the bar again for loss. We're being asked to remove human touch, human response, human presence, human connection in a way that we've all had it to some degree. So if you're being alone, now you got to walk through life alone? Really? The work of Pauline Boss has been really insightful for me personally in managing loss for a number of reasons that I'll pass along some of the few tidbits that I hope will be beneficial to you. Four-part recipe in handling loss and sadness around it. The first is to identify it and diagnose it. That's what it was like in 2016 when I first heard Pauline Boss say it. It was like this big validation moment that the things that I had been experiencing that I couldn't quite put my finger on, but I knew I was losing things and had loss. It's like, whoa, a big weight out was off my shoulders, just even knowing the term ambiguous loss. Why is there a pile-on? But then from there, you've got to keep going. That's just the first part, is identify it. The next part, step 2, is really around having someone acknowledge it, someone to see you in it, someone to actually be there with you day in and day out, or at least on occasion. It's like this is the part where when we have a funeral, for example, we acknowledge, we see someone has died, and then we expect the community to come together to say, we see this sorrow, and we want to bring you comfort, and we want to support you. That's the seeing and the acknowledging part. And sometimes people don't get seen or don't feel like anyone can see us in it. Then the third step comes. Who's actually supporting you? Like sometimes you can't go to the people who are employed to have them help you get a job. It just doesn't work. Sometimes you need other systems. Or what if you're getting divorced or you've been divorced and all you're surrounded by is people with happy marriages and families? It's not very comforting sometimes. So you might have to get with the right kinds of groups and people who can actually relate and understand. Then comes the fourth step. So the fourth step is who's actually going to give you that skilled help. That's often when the therapist or coach can step in to help you. If you're lucky enough to have one person who can do all four things, then hooray for you. That's awesome. But it's a little bit more common and a little bit more normal that you're going to need several kinds of people in different categories to give you some support. Someone who might see you and help you identify it, someone who can coach you through, and then someone who can walk through in the different sets of skills that you need. So when it comes to all of these kinds of areas, you realize that someone will step in, and it's like in that emotional hunger that you're feeling in the loss. It's like they just offer you a little piece of bread and you're like, okay, well, that helps me. I'm not going to die, right? And then sometimes it goes from there and you're with a great group of people that you just feel light and you feel like you can laugh. It's like you're at the buffet table of life. And then you get something else that just kind of gives you that fresh drink of water. Over time, as you keep having these support systems in your life, you get the nourishment that you need. You regain a little bit of strength, and then you start finding more ways to keep feeding yourself and growing your own garden. Having reliable and good nurturing friends is an amazing gift in life. I hope you're being supported in your transitions through the changes that the pandemic has brought, especially if it's a pile-on with a lot of other losses. If you're not getting that support, then I want to offer it. I'm here and I'm ready to help.